Now that leads it into sort of the last part I wanted to do. So you on your YouTube,
Mm,
actually, why don't you talk about this? You're the one who asked archaeologists for help involving the Lego League, I believe is what it was, and the
mm,
STEAM
mm,
kids. Explain to the viewers sort of what they asked. I know I have your questions that you
mm.
posted, but I know explain sort of what they asked archaeologists for. What are some of the questions that they asked?
Yeah, well, it's a small after school club that I was contacted by. Although I've
Hmm.
since learned that this competition is not only international, it's also museums are entering. It's not
Oh,
just
cool,
small groups. It's
cool.
uh, but it's a competition where there are two parts to
Hmm.
each attempt, each team's entry, where you build something robots out of Lego that will do
Yeah.
certain tasks. But then also as well, you have a sort of a presentation element to it, and the presentation has to be attempting to describe and perhaps even solve a problem in a given situation or scenario. And in this
Hmm.
instance, the theme of the competition is archaeology. And apparently they had reached out to various archaeologists and hadn't heard back. And
Hmm.
I responded, and I can see why they hadn't heard back. It was clear that you had some of the kids individually had just sent an email to me. Like one of them was just like a sentence saying, "You're pretty good." like, can you
Yeah.
help us? I was like, okay. But then,
Yeah.
yeah, the team leader reached out, and yeah. Um, and what they were looking for was ideas
Yeah.
um, of what to include in their solution. So the solution that they were trying to offer was a solution to the problem of public archaeology.
Yeah.
Why it is that archaeologists often struggle to explain what archaeology is, or to have their explanations understood by the public, so that the public doesn't think, for example, that they study dinosaurs or
Yeah.
that they are treasure hunters or whatever.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to just tell them my perspective, and this is one of the
Yeah. Of
reasons why,
course. Yeah.
obviously, you've highlighted, the need to have uh, the conversation that you had yesterday and today to get as broad an answer as possible. And I suggested that it would be a good idea for people to suggest artifacts and things that might go into essentially a box that they are proposing could be made, that would be mailed to people who want to learn about archaeology,
Yeah.
and in it would be an artifact of the week, maybe an information sheet, maybe a profile on an archaeologist from history, or something like that. And my big piece of advice to them was that whatever they talk about has to be uh, about more than just, as it were, the fact of the thing existing. So rather than just
Yeah.
saying, here is a claymore sword from medieval Scotland or whatever,
Yeah.
actually finding an instance of that sword or that artifact that has a broader story, whether it's connected to other artifacts around it that were discovered, whether it's connected to a person in history, something that underscores the value of finding things beyond simply their value monetarily, or their interest value.
Yeah.
And so far, it seems as though we've had a few responses, a few interesting comments have come back, and I'm going to be collating them and sending them over to the school this
Yeah.
week, actually,
Of
to the
course. Yeah.
um, and it's just lovely to see, actually, and it's been it's been amazing to see. So someone that I reached out to in Norway said that their local museum has entered the competition, and
Oh, that's
yeah,
cool.
they're also seeking to get
Yeah.
advice. So yeah, it's cool. And uh, I think one of the things that they really struck me though was that it's nice to see that not just archaeologists are tackling this sort of issue,
Yeah.
you know, because actually an awful lot of the answers that an awful lot of archaeologists have come up with so far have been academicized. Uh,
Yeah.
there's one or two archaeologists who, since more or less actually got started when I started, 2012 or whatever, um, 2010, 2012, who went on to sort of to try and codify what public archaeology is, and try
Yeah.
and understand it from a very academic standpoint, and try and sort of get stats and data on how it's done. Whereas actually, I think the value of public archaeology should always have been, and I think is at its best, in just having these conversations,
Yeah.
just a basic conversation with and being, again, we come back to my thing, being open, being available, being accessible,
Yeah.
and uh, and not seeking to get a book out of it,
Yeah. Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
the thing, that is it, and so I don't know how ultimately how helpful or how useful uh
Mhm.
I will be to them, but so
Yeah.
far I think at the very least I've given them some ideas to apply to whatever they then come
Yeah.
across,
Well,
and hopefully
yeah.
we'll be able to send more ideas over as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's sort of my intention with this, because I know, like, remind me what the questions that you had. It was like a favorite archaeological fact, artifact, place, or person. Was that, I believe?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's more or
Oh,
less what's your favorite,
yeah.
and in answering what your favorite is, you're basically also just saying, you're inviting people over. You're sort of
Yeah.
saying, come again,
Exactly.
look at this cool thing. This is why it's cool.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and with that in mind, I'm going to share my screen because I want to share sort of my broad favorites. There's going to be a few different pictures I show, but my broad
Hmm.
favorites, they're all connected in the same thing. See your photo. Okay. Do, do, do. There we go. Yep. So can you see my picture here?
Yeah, Clovis. Yeah.
Okay, so my favorite um artifacts, it's an artifact class, and what it is it is lithics. Lithics is the most one of the two most common artifact types in the world, or among the
Hmm.
most common, the other being ceramics. And so one thing I want to point out, and when, by the way, hi kids, watching this. But one thing I want to point out is that, well, a lot of people, when they look at, lithics, when they look at, say, a Clovis point like you see here, they tend to, and to be fair, this is a replica. All these things I'm showing are replicas. I paid for them to be made. But but when you look at something like a projectile point, a lot of people tend to think, oh, well, this is a nice sharp point or a nice pretty point. And sure, they are. Clovis point, for example, are oftentimes considered the epitome of lithic technology because of just how difficult they are to make. But what is
Mm,
important, really important about lithics is the stories that they can tell, is,
mm,
how they can inform you about the human past and the human condition. Like, for example, Clovis. While now Clovis is no longer thought to be the first group of the ancestors of Native Americans who came into the Americas, because there are pre-Clovis sites,
mm,
Clovis is still among the first, and it was for the longest time what first gave archaeologists the look into what the early North American, the settlement of the North American, sorry, of the Americas overall, looked like.
mm,
And they can
mm,
tell us that, but also because we can track their migration. It can tell us about how they constructed these things, the type of materials that they used, um, the types of animals that they hunted, and how they lived. And that is really the power of lithics, is they can tell us ways that people, how their subsistence looked like, what maybe their daily jobs look like, and we'll get more into that in one of the other pictures I want to show. But what maybe their, how, what were the sort of jobs or tasks that they needed completed,
mm,
in order, which is why they made the various lithic artifacts they had. But it can also tell us, like, their mobility. Like, oh, this is a piece of really high quality flint/chert. For those of you watching, flint and chert are the same thing, just different names. It's called flint generally over in uh, Asia and Europe. And chert here in the Americas, they're the same thing. But it's like, oh, this is really high quality stone, but it's not found here, say, and I'm just going to pick a random, name. You know, it's not found here, say, in the area of London or the area of in the United States of Atlanta, but it is found way over here in this other area. And so we
Hmm.
know that because it's made of this, one way or another, they either went and got it or traded with somebody to get the stone to make the point. And so
Mm.
that tells us, about mobility and trade. You know,
Mm.
uh, and then see here, we have other points I can share here. Uh, let's see here. I'm not going to show all of them, but like can give a general idea of, for example, we have we have this right here. This is from the Middle Woodland period, and this is a what
Hmm.
is called a Jack's Reef corner notched, and it's generally from the southeastern part of the United States. But like as you can see, it's significantly smaller over the
Mm.
course of several thousand years as the last glacial maximum, or what we commonly call the ice age, began to recede, and all of the large, mammals like woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, etc., uh, began, giant ground sloths began to die out. The need for large points like Clovis points began to fall by the wayside
Hmm.
because now they were hunting smaller animals like deer and elk. And well, yes, it is still a big animal. The American bison, which is, well, yes,
Mm.
big, significantly smaller than even Bison antiquus, the bison species that was alive during the last glacial maximum. And so,
Hmm.
because of that, points got smaller, and they began to be attached rather than to spear shafts. They began to be attached to first, say, atlatl darts. Uh, an atlatl being a paddle that you use to sort of throw a large arrow called an atlatl dart at a deer or something. And then eventually they got even smaller. Uh, pull up not my last one, but the next to last picture. Sorry, no, not the next to last picture, but one of the last three pictures. Why is it? There we go. Eventually they got smaller, and they became very small triangular points like this Mississippian triangular point you see here, which is where we begin to
Mm.
see the bow and arrow in the Americas develop, because bows and arrows in the Americas were developed rather late, which I do want to point out does not mean that technology in the Americas was any more or less, it was any less advanced than in Europe. It just meant that the atlatl was such a good piece of technology they had no need to change it until
Yeah.
later. But
Yeah. There was
you
no requirement. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But
Mm.
like eventually, with the introduction of the bow and arrow, you begin to see this small triangular points like this in
Mm.
the late woodland, and then eventually the Mississippian period. But it's not just that. As I alluded to, and I'll bring up another picture in a second, but as I alluded to, you can learn about what sort of daily activities somebody might have been doing based on lithics. Specifically, we can see this in things such as uh, now, this is the next to last one. We can see this in what are known as microblades, which you can see right here.
Yeah.
It literally micro, they're little bladelets, which you would make by breaking it off either a cylindrical blade core or a wedge shaped blade core, and then you would eventually uh, put it into something
So
like,
it's almost like you have a cylinder of rock that when you
yeah,
hit it, sharp pieces come off. Basically, it's like glass shattering, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Mm.
yeah.
Mm.
And then eventually you would put it into something like a piece of bone or wood, sort of like this, and make sort of a saw or what is
Yeah.
known as a composite tool. And
Mm.
these were done for a variety of things. One, to conserve resources, going back to the mobility thing. A lot of times these were done because high quality stone materials were very scattered and you couldn't
Hmm.
always go to them. And so you needed a way to conserve material. So, like, for example, a Clovis point is a singular piece of, it's a singular piece of rock. And sure, it's a good tool, but if it breaks, you've lost an
Mm.
entire tool. Whereas if one of these little bladelets you can see on this thing, one, two, three, four, if one of these little bladelets breaks, you still have a usable knife, and all you have to do is replace one part of it.
Mm.
And so that's one thing. And so it's to conserve resources. But also, there have been archaeological studies done showing that these were very good at carving up, say, rawhide or leather or other things, fur, to create winter clothing, warm,
Mm.
high quality, warm winter clothing in the late glacial maximum, and especially
Mm.
in East Asia, where microblades were really predominant. I know microblades existed in Europe as well, but really
Mm.
the sort of big cultural center of microblade technology is in Northeast Asia, Siberia, Mongolia, the northern parts of China, and Japan and the Koreas.
Mm.
What is the Korean Peninsula? So we can see these things, and be like, oh, it's a composite tool. Uh, Generally, nominally, they're sharper than bifaces, so you've got a better cutting tool that can easily cut through meat and again cut through leather to make better clothing. You
Mm.
can conserve resources, any number of things. And that's the beauty of lithics, is like whereas a lot of people see, oh, a pretty stone, if when you keep it in its context, but if if you really dig into what it is and why it was made, you can learn so much about the human
Mm.
condition and the human history of humanity as a whole. And that's why I think lithic artifacts are my favorite artifact, um,
Mm.
in general. And there are other things I like. I have favorite archaeological places. Like I like Cahokia and Moundville, and there's too many to pick from. But in terms of artifact, it's always falls back on lithics, and that's because
Mm.
it is one of those things that is the one of the oldest artifacts we can find in the human record, and it always
Mm.
tells us about the human condition and how we adapted and lived and what jobs we had, etc.
Yeah,
So
and the crucial thing, and this applies to the European Mesolithic and as
yeah,
well, is that, well, through the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, is that at any given stage, these different identifiable stone tool technologies are always the best adapted response to the
yeah,
requirements of the environment that people are living in.
hmm,
It's not people making do. It's not people struggling. It's people making the best decision with the
yeah,
materials that they have. And in the case of what we call here microliths, small
yeah,
stones, literally, uh, they're also very, and presumably this must be similar for microblades, that they are
yeah,
very quickly reconfigurable as well. So you could make
yeah,
an arrowhead, you could make a spear,
yeah.
you could make a scraper, you could
Yeah,
make a saw, just
yeah,
using these in
yeah.
different configurations. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, in fact, in Northeast Asia, and also I said Northeast Asia, but also the Arctic of North America as
Hmm.
well is another big heartland. I've seen pictures of microblades that are just a singular microblade inset into a handle
Hmm.
that sort of look like, say, an X-Acto knife,
Yeah.
using it as sort of an X-Acto knife or a scalpel to carve through, things like that. But I've seen
Hmm.
pictures of arrows, all kinds of things. But yeah, exactly. They're very reconfigurable. They're very adaptable. They're very portable. All kinds of things that can tell you about how people were living and what they felt was important to the way they lived and to their daily
Hmm.
activities.
Hmm.
And so,
And ultimately, what makes their
yeah,
lives easier?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
also what kind of environment they were living in.
Hmm.
What is this a tool that's better suited for, say, a cold dry environment? Is it a tool for a hot wet environment, a cold wet environment?
Hmm.
All kinds of things. A desert environment. These are the things that lithic artifacts, among other artifacts. I don't want to just say lithics are the only ones, but but these are the things that lithic artifacts can tell us,
Hmm.
and it's just fascinating to me as somebody who's going to grad school for lithic study and lithic analysis.
Hmm.
So, so yeah, so there you go. I think that's gonna have to be my favorite artifact type. So I hope this helps. You, of course, Mark, but also, I hope it helps you kids who are watching this with your
Hmm.
project. So,
Cool.
and with that, I think that's a good way to sort of end the video. Thank you, Mark, for coming on. Thank you for the discussion. I think, as
You're
with the one
welcome.
last night, I think it was a very productive discussion,
Hmm.
and will very much, I think, help the broader conversation as a whole throughout the archaeological community. So with that,
Yeah.
thank you again, Mark, for coming on. And I hope everyone has a good day. And remember to like, share, and subscribe.
I've broken a sieve, I'm sorry to say it. It speared me. Yeah, as I broke it.
It wasn't particularly wet then.
Oh, lovely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Don't have a pencil, do you?
In the drawing box.
I don't know.
They put it over the